Hi, I'm Sean McVeigh with Sean's Outdoor Adventures, and in this video I'm going to go over how to fletch an arrow. To begin with, I'm going to go over the particular fletching jig that I have. I got this a long time ago. It's a single unit, and you can only fletch one fletching at a time. So it's a slow process. If you have multiple of these, you can do many arrows at once and then rotate them when it comes time to do the next fletching. But like I said, I only have one. Another approach you can use is what they call an Arizona E-Z Fletcher, or a style of that type where you can do all three fletchings at the same time. I haven't had too many problems with the Arizona E-Z Fletcher in recent times, but a long time ago I had a guy, before I had my own fletcher, I took it to an arrow to a store to have it refletched because I had shot through the fletchings while I was shooting my arrows. And in the process, he used the Arizona E-Z Fletcher, and they didn't come out very symmetrical. One was really slanted, so you know, it depends on who's using it, I guess. But anyway, I'm going to go over this one here. This is like I said, any of these single units like this are going to work pretty much the same. What happens is we set it up. You can fasten it down, but I don't bother because I like to be able to move it around if I want to, and I just don't go near it while the glue is drying, so I don't knock it over. So what I've done is I've cleaned off the arrow using a razor blade. I have this small little retractable razor blade. I usually extend it out, and I shave the fletching off, clean it all up nicely, and then one of the things that I use that helps is this is a basically a cleaner that you put the arrow in, and it helps to clean the surface off, gets the grease and stuff off. This is SSR Arrow Surface Cleaner. I've had this bottle for probably 10 years, I don't know, a long time. They say you're supposed to replace it every year or two, but it's still working fine for me. So anyway, shave off the old fletchings and then soak it in that for a minute or two, and then I just leave them lay out on the side of a table where the end of that I've just cleaned off is hanging off the table, so it's not in contact with anything. I let it dry, and then I come over to my jig and I place the Nock down into the jig, and now I'm ready to start my first fletch. I want to talk about different types of fletchings and helicals. Now, this is a straight fletch jig, clamp, I should say, clamp, and this is a helical curve. I used to put a helical curve on all of my arrows, but I found that with the carbon shaft, because of how thin the diameter of them is, I have a hard time getting them to glue well with that clamp. So I pretty much always use a straight clamp. And I've done extensive testing, and people say that the helical curve helps the arrow recover better and helps with accuracy, but I've found, at least shooting with compound bows, it really hasn't made any difference. I shoot a straight fletch arrow just as accurately as I do a helical curve. So this is a straight fletch jig. I'm going to fletch this arrow actually from my dad, and I've already done a few. And I'm using full-length fletchings for this project because that's what he likes to shoot. And normally you have one fletching that's an odd color, but I'm doing them all white for him because we're going to do some videoing of our hunting this year, and having all white helps it show up better on the video. But in general, you're going to fletch two fletchings of the same color and one of a different color. Here would be an example of that. This is an older arrow, an aluminum arrow with feather fletches on it. So there's two white and a yellow. And this is a carbon arrow with vanes that are plastic. And most of the arrows that you do nowadays or that you see have plastic vanes of some type. The other option is, and this is what I use, it's called a blazer vane. It's a very short fletch. And what I want to point out to you is when you load a blazer vane into your fletching jig, what happens is when you put this on the arrow, because there's fletching here and nothing all the way up here, I'm going to exaggerate, but if this is the arrow, it tips forward and the back end where the fletching is comes off the arrow, so you don't get a good glue set. So what I do is I take another blazer vane and I put it up in the front of the fletching clamp, like this. So now I have a blazer vane that I'm going to glue on in the back, and I'm going to put glue on that, and I have a blazer vane in the front with no glue on it, and that just keeps it so I have a nice even glue set on the blazer vane when I'm gluing it onto the arrow. But like I said, for this project I'm going to glue on a full length, well, I'm calling it full length, I think that's either a 4 or a 5-inch fletch right there. And the back of the jig, this particular jig, has a round piece to help, actually I'm holding it upside down. The back of the jig has a straight end, and this round piece is going to go up at toward the tip of the arrow, that direction. So I'm going to have the back of my fletching at the bottom of the jig, and what I typically do is line up the very bottom of the fletch with the bottom of the jig where that cutout is. And another thing I do is I try to not touch the face of where I'm going to be putting the glue very much. So I'll put it in there and I just kind of open the jig a little, and you saw it pop down in. Now I want to move it back just about 1 millimeter, so I'm going to open the jig just a hair and push it back with my finger. Now I want to go over the gluing process. I've used different types of glue. The glue that seems to work best for me is Fast Set, but this tube I've had for a while. There could be even better products out there now, but this is what's been working for me. What I like to do when I'm putting the glue on, and I think this is kind of important, another thing I'll mention too is I've talked to people who have used things like super glue or crazy glue, but I prefer a glue that's specific for gluing on arrow fletches. But anyway, what I want to point out is you can put the glue and just put a stream all the way down where you want it and then put it on. The problem with that is that sometimes you get air pockets, and the fletching can actually come up very easily in that air pocket area. So what I do is I glue down, and then I kind of go all the way across the whole fletching, going, in a circular motion to make sure the glue is spread out and touching every single square surface area on the part where I've glued. So let me just show you how I'm doing this. I've got my glue here. Now, like I was saying, some people just go straight down like this. I'm just backing up it. They just go straight down. And I'll show you when I get to the end. I'll point out a few areas that could become air pocket areas. So if you look at this, I'm not sure how it'll come out on the video. I can see it, but there's lots of air pockets in here where I've squeezed the glue out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back over the arrow, and I'm just, the fletch, and I'm going to kind of just do a circular motion to make sure that glue is covering this surface completely and there's no air pockets whatsoever. Because if I don't do that, as I said, your fletching could come up, and you don't want to fletch a whole arrow and then have one of the fletchings come up just because the glue, you had an air pocket in there, because then you're going to have to cut it all off and start from scratch. What I like to do is clean off the tip before I put the cap back on. I'll do that in a moment. But I'm going to bring this over here. I'm going to take my clamp and I'm going to place it in here, and I want to make sure that it's there's even pressure all the way across the arrow shaft, which there is. Now I don't want to press down too hard on this, because what I've had happen in the past is the Nock set in here, the Nock, can actually slide on the piece where it's currently attached to, and when that slides, the back of the arrow comes away from the fletch, and if you let the glue harden, you end up with the back end of the fletch coming off very easily. So I just put the clamp on gently and put a little pressure. I'm also holding my thumb under. I don't want to touch too much of the arrow to get the oils from my finger on there, but I'm just putting a little pressure there So now what I'm going to do is, I'm not in any rush, so I'm going to actually leave this sit for at least 12 hours. I usually put one on at night and let it dry all night while I'm sleeping. In the morning before I leave for work or do whatever, I'll rotate the, I'll take the clamp off, which I'll show you. I'll actually come back in 12 hours to do this. I'll take the clamp off, I'll rotate the back end here till it clicks, and then I'll do the next fletch and let it dry for another 12 hours. You don't have to let it dry that long. I mean, the glue, I have to read the instructions again, but probably within 20, 30 minutes, an hour, whatever it is, they say you can go ahead and take the clamp off and glue the next one on. You just need to give the glue more time to dry before shooting it. But I just like to leave it on there. Like I said, I'm not in any rush. I just throw a fletch on there, let it dry for 12 hours, make sure it's a good solid dry, and then I go to the next one and I continue on from there. So that's basically how to fletch an arrow. And like I said, we'll pop back, look at this in 12 hours, glue another one on, and we'll finish the video. I'm now ready to put my next fletch on. It's been many hours since I put the first one on. And one of the things I normally do when I get ready to put my next fletch on is I look at the one that is currently held by the clamp, and I make sure it looks like it's glued down properly all the way around. Sometimes you can see if the fletch itself has come off of the arrow a little bit, and if that's the case, you're going to need to, well, it's best to address it right away while the clamp is still on it. Let's say I saw a little bit of the fletch come up, I could put some glue in there and try to push the clamp a little bit to get that part to glue down tightly. Everything looks good, so I'm just going to I'm holding my arrow in place. Normally I would just leave it sitting on the bench without picking it up, but because I'm making this video, I've lifted it so that you can see it a little clearer. But I just squeeze the clamp together and release it, and that fletch looks really good. Looks nice and tight on the arrow. So all I do is simply turn this until it clicks into next position right there, and then I'm going to glue my next arrow on, or my next fletch on. So I'm just going to set this back down. I just set this in here, and then I let it drop in, and then I carefully slide it with my finger. I'm just basically opening the clamp the slightest bit so it can slide in there. It's in position now, and one thing I want to point out is you really have to look to make sure that it's not, none of the fletch is clamped down in the clamp. I once did a fletch where I wasn't paying close enough attention. Part of it got down in the clamp a little bit, so that whole part of the fletch did not glue to the arrow. So anyway, this looks nice and even. It's right to the very edge. I'm going to get my glue, and I'm going to glue this the same way I did the last one. I'm going to put a whole strip of glue on, and then I'm going to make sure that it's touching every part of the fletch by just doing a circular motion on there, and that's just to prevent any air bubbles from getting in there and areas where the fletch could come up more easily. I'm just doing little circular motions, and because of that, everything is like the fletch itself is white, the glue is clear. I'm thinking it might not show up real well on the video, but if you ever do a fletch, you'll be able to tell for yourself what I'm talking about. You just want to make sure that you see at least a little film of glue all the way across the fletch. At least that's my opinion. Place the clamp in place. Everything is in position. I double check the whole fletch itself is in contact with the arrow. I will go ahead and let that sit for another 12 hours or so. My dad is going to be shooting these arrows through a whisker biscuit, which has a little bit of friction on the fletch as they go through. So what I like to do is take a little bit of glue in the front of the fletch and just put a little glue around the edges where the fletch comes in contact with the arrow, right around in here and up the sides, just a 1/4 of an inch or so, 1/8 of an inch. And that just helps to keep that fletch from peeling up while going through the bristles of a whisker biscuit. So I don't put a lot on there. I'm just barely letting it come out, and and that's going to help it stay in position for a long time as he shoots through that whisker biscuit. Another thing I just want to point out real quick is on most nocks there's a little tongue that sticks off on one side of the nock. And that's designed so that you can actually grab an arrow and knock it on the string without even having to look at it. When I used to shoot with fingers, the odd color fletch always faced away from the bow because of the style of arrow rest. You had to shoot it that way. Nowadays, most style rests have you face the odd color fletch facing straight up. So what you would simply do is hold the arrow in the position you would want it on the string, whether it's odd color up or odd color away from the bow, and then rotate the nock so that that little plastic tongue is facing away from the bow. So that way, whenever you grab for that arrow, you can just feel for that little tongue and click it on your string without even having to look at it. I happen to have a little nock turner right here, so you would just place the arrow in there and then you could rotate it in any direction. And if you don't have one of these nifty little nock turners, that's okay. You can simply clip the arrow onto the string and then rotate it to get to the position you need it. Now that's with a carbon arrow and the style of nocks used for that. If you're using aluminum or cedar shafts, then a lot of those styles you can't turn the nock once it's in place. You actually have to glue it in place. So what you'll want to do is put glue in the nock and then put it on the arrow and twist it into the position you want and then let it dry in that position. So anyway, I hope this video has helped you. I hope if you're interested in fletching an arrow, I hope you have a good idea on how to do it. Now that I'm looking at this arrow, by the way, this has a white wrap on it, and you can get those to put on your arrows. I have some laying around here. Here we go. And what you would do is pull the sticker off, lay it flat once you've got the old fletching off, and then you would simply roll the arrow across the sticker and it rolls onto there, and then you fletch right on top of that. Now if you don't want to go through all this trouble and you do need an arrow refletched and you don't have anyone who can do it for you, they also make shrink wrap fletchings where it has like a white looking tube that'll go over the arrow and you actually put it in hot water and it shrinks it to the arrow. Regardless, I hope this video has helped, and if you've never fletched an arrow and you have the opportunity to do so, I hope you know how to do it now. Stay tuned for my videos in the future. Take care and God bless.